Ariana Grande just released her new album, Positions, and a lot of the reaction is a mixed bag. Some of it good, but some of it bad. And I'm here to tell you what's up. So before we jump into the video, I just want to say thank you so much for all the love my first 2 YouTube videos got. The reaction was better than I expected for my first week. There was over 5,000 views for the first 2 videos and almost 1,000 new subscribers. I read so many comments from you guys saying how long you've been reading Breathe Heavy, some of you for the entire 16 years. And just saying that out loud sounds so crazy. I'm very, very grateful for you and just so appreciative. If you're new to this channel, I'm Jordan Miller and I own a pop music news community called Breathe Heavy, and the forum is called Exhale. There are literally thousands of members posting hundreds of comments every single day. 2020 has actually been the most successful year in Breathe Heavy's history. It's actually what inspired me to start a YouTube channel to really get the message out there that this community exists. I've also been attempting YouTube for many, many years and just didn't know what I wanted to say until now. And now I can't seem to stop talking. Another reason why I have this YouTube channel is I want to be an example of what's possible. I want to show people how important it is to have a community for your brand and how incredibly powerful that can be. Which reminds me, please smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the notification bell. What that does is that tells the almighty YouTube algorithm that people are engaging with my videos. And then in return, they promote these videos to more people who hopefully do the same thing by liking and subscribing, and the channel begins to really grow and I get to create more awesome content for you. Also, I just want to add that I'm having a lot of fun doing this, so thank you so much. Before we jump into the video, I'd love for you to leave a comment and just tell me what your initial reaction to Positions was. Then watch the entire video and circle back and tell me if this video helped change your perspective at all. All right, let's jump into Position. But first, play that intro. Ariana Grande's new album, Positions, is officially out. She surprised fans in October 2020 with an announcement saying she was releasing an album that month. Only a couple weeks later, and here we are with Positions. It's a record she actually spent a couple years working on. Although she was touring last year and just obviously extremely busy being Ariana Grande, she has a passion for recording music, so she always finds time to create it. The reason why Ariana can put so many albums out in a short period of time is because she genuinely loves to make music. So she's constantly writing, she's constantly recording, she's constantly checking in with her collaborators for new ideas and telling them her ideas. And eventually when she gets to a place where she feels like she has 10 to 12 songs or different ideas, that's when an album really comes together for her.
I think the amount that I have worked on this year that was supposed to be my off year is like crazy. I've like never been more nonstop in my entire life, and it's like kooky. I think because like once I made the decision that I wanted to put something out, I was like, okay, now I need to shoot 76 videos, do 76 photo shoots in the middle of a pandemic. I need to get everyone tested 300 times a week. I need to put together these mixes, approve all these masters, and I have notes on everything. I'm not happy with anything. I need to make sure everything is perfect. I need to da-da-da-da. And I think I just kind of like drove myself a little crazy for a while.
Now, I'll be honest, when I first heard Positions, I was not feeling it. Straight up, I was pretty disappointed with it. I just felt like initially it sounded a lot like Sweetener to me, and Pharrell Williams was the producer of that album, and he, for me, is very hit or miss. And that's no shade at Pharrell at all. In fact, Pharrell is actually the person that inspired the name Breathe Heavy. He made a remix for Britney Spears, and when I was 15 years old, I was just blown away by it. I'll definitely do a separate video later explaining where the name Breathe Heavy came from, but for now, let's stick to Ariana. So like I mentioned, didn't care for Positions off the bat, and I found myself coming back to the album periodically over the last few days. Each time I listened through, I was beginning to unwrap layers of meaning that I hadn't really noticed before. That's one thing I've noticed about myself personally, is that I tend to gravitate towards songs that are instant hits to me. But some of my most favorite albums and songs are songs that grew over time. Positions is an album that's gonna age really, really well. Bookmark me. So I've been listening for the last few days, and I gotta admit, I've done a total 180. So what I thought I would do, instead of doing a typical album review or reacting to the album as I'm listening to it, because there's already tons of those kinds of videos on YouTube anyway, I thought an interesting angle would be to read reviews that are already online about the album and give my take on that, whether I agree or not. Instead of reading the entire review, I'm just gonna pull out bits and pieces from each media source and give my take on it. The first one I'm gonna do is from Pitchfork. They're a music media giant, and they actually had one of my favorite reviews, so I'm gonna just start with that. Pitchfork gave it a 7.4 out of 10. They are pretty tough when it comes to music, so 7.4 is actually a pretty good score for Pitchfork. So they write, The record resonates partly because it doesn't weld grand statements out of living with trauma. It narrows in on the wobbly path of pleading with yourself, the begging and bargaining of healing. The reason why I resonated with Pitchfork's review more than all the other media places is because their review doesn't hyper-focus on and a lot of positions does have to deal with themes of that, but Pitchfork was really able to dig past those layers and really see what the album actually means, which is an arc for the beginning of a new relationship. So in the beginning of the album, Ariana starts with Shut Up, and it's her kind of rejecting the narrative that the media has given for her, but you can also look at it through the lens of a romantic relationship. Meaning she is her own worst enemy sometimes, and the thoughts in her own mind are the things that stop her from pursuing relationships, and she's basically telling those voices to shut up. Then towards the middle of the album, Ariana begins to kind of contemplate if she even deserves to be in love. And that's really evident on Off the Table with The Weeknd, which by the way is honestly one of my favorite songs, which I didn't expect because at first I was not feeling that collabo. I think I was expecting another Love Me Harder and it just isn't the same. It just goes to show that these two can make different types of songs together and it still sounds awesome. All right, moving on. The next one's from ID and they write, "Where Positions does succeed is in resetting Ariana's narrative. There are small acknowledgments to past trauma, but these are now just pieces of a bigger puzzle that she's solving. What does feel deliberate is that with this new album, she's giving people something new to talk about. And this time it's sexy and salacious." What I really like about this part of ID's review is that they touch on her trauma, and I just recently watched one of Ariana's interviews. It was with the Zach Sang show. Shout out to them, they're just incredible. Ariana kind of touched on her trauma in that interview and how that obviously still affects her today. And what I found really fascinating about her interview and her talking about her trauma is that she's self-aware enough to understand that there are times in her life where she may not be thinking in the most stable of ways, but she recognizes that and she is able to kind of separate the two. She's able to say, okay, the reason why I'm thinking this way is because of PTSD or past trauma that's affecting my present moment. And she recognizes that. That self-awareness is a game changer for her. This is gonna be something that she deals with for the rest of her life because these things that had happened to her, for instance, the Manchester bombing or Mac Miller passing away, or her breaking up with ex-fiance Pete Davidson. These things happened in a pretty short period of time from one another, and she's still kind of dealing with the wreckage from it, but not in the same way as she did on Thank You Next. Thank You Next was a direct response to all of those things that had happened, and Positions is a nice segue into her new future self. And in that sense, it's really refreshing, and I felt like a lot of the reviews didn't touch on that. A lot of the reviews didn't really go into why she decided to release Positions. And in my opinion, it's because she wanted to kind of focus and shift her mindset on something new. And one thing that I think is super cool about Positions is that it's a very R&B leaning album, which is something that we haven't exactly heard from her before, at least not a full body of work. The next one is from the Evening Standard, and they write, "Musically, she isn't firing as hard as she was when she released her last two albums, Sweetener and Thank You Next, just 6 months apart. Full of songs, less than 3 minutes long. Positions is over quickly. Sounds like she has more important things to do." That part of the review really bothered me because she didn't have to release this album. She could have easily waited at least probably a couple years. You know, she's released album after album after album in a short period of time. So it's not like she's rushing through to get an album out just because she wants to get an album out. In fact, she probably had this album finished months ago and just wasn't sure when she should release it because of the time that we're in. A lot of artists feel like it's inappropriate to release music, but what Gaga and Ariana have stated now is that there are a lot of people in the world who are sad, and they're in a position to be able to make literally millions of people happy by releasing this music. So she actually did us a huge solid by releasing this album now.
Everyone is aware of what's happening. I'm aware of what's happening, and this is also my job at the end of the day. And I know that in my heart, this will make a lot of people feel something good.
One thing about songs that are 2.5 minutes is that it's very good for streaming. So the shorter the songs, the more that people can stream throughout the day, which jacks up stream counts. But one thing I think is worth mentioning is that Ariana, even though she gets all these number ones and smashes the charts constantly, she doesn't release music to get a number one. She releases the music because she's genuinely passionate about it. She enjoys doing it. She is truly a musician and an artist. So by not releasing music, part of her life is empty. She gets a lot of fulfillment out of releasing this music. So I didn't actually agree at all with her having more important things to do. By the way, the Evening Standard rated it a 3 out of 5. Next up is Stereo Gum. Stereo Gum is typically a website that covers more independent music, but they do lots of reviews, including Positions. So they're right. Positions ultimately traces the same arc many stable relationships do. The album's initial rush levels off into normalcy, interrupted by occasional flashes of excitement. Hopefully Positions is a detour and not the new normal, or else her career might start to follow the same trajectory from enthralling to comfortable stasis. This to me is a totally fair assessment. Anytime someone drags Ariana just even a little bit, I get a little defensive, but I actually agree with them in this sense. I think Positions is special because it's magic in a bottle, but if she did another Positions down the road, it would kind of lose its charm. Or that the follow-up wouldn't be as special because we have Positions. I do want to mention that Ariana actually is considering releasing another album before going on tour again. She says that artists won't likely go on tour until at least 2022, so she has plans to release another album and then tour both of those, assuming the world is in a better place for artists to go on tour. Here's a little bit from her interview on the Zach Sang Show.
I mean, I don't think people are going to be touring till 2022. I don't see it as a possibility, and I don't think I would feel safe. I don't want to put my fans in danger. I kind of liked doing Sweetener and Thank You Next and then touring both together. So maybe after whenever the next one happens, which will not be soon, but and the pandemic sorts itself out, maybe that would be a good time to start thinking about it. But I think that just the state of the world right now is not safe. It's not a safe time for people to be traveling and going to shows. And I don't know why people are like pretending that their tours are going to happen right now. They're like delaying to the summer. And I'm like, yeah, good luck.
Next up, we have a site called The Line of Best Fit. They rate the album an 8 out of 10. They write 3 albums in 3 years, 4 albums in 5, and each of them in a minor masterpiece. While Thank You Next is probably her best work, and it will probably remain that way forever, Positions is Grande's most carefree, most playful, most mature work to date. Definitely agree with that as well. I think Thank You Next is in a league of its own. She had so many experiences to pull from for Thank You Next, and then when she created Positions, she was falling in love, and she kind of dealt with those traumas already. So she pulled from her new relationship. And to be honest, that's got to be really refreshing for her. Also, I agree that this is her most mature work to date. And it's not because she's singing about sexual innuendo or anything like that. I think it's because she had the most creative control over the album. If you look at the album's track listing credits, Ariana co-wrote every single song, which is super cool because an artist of her caliber can rely on all sorts of A-list songwriters to create their work. But she is completely hands-on, and it's evident through the music. Next up is Slant. They gave it a 3 out of 5. This is what they have to say. Too many of the songs on Positions, however, rely on the same mid-tempo trap pop that populated Grande's previous 2 efforts, particularly Thank You Next. What once seemed refreshing in its minimalism is quickly starting to feel insubstantial. It might be time for contemporary pop's reigning vocal acrobat to more fully commit to some new positions. I do think they bring up a valid point. From a lot of the comments that I read on the internet, a lot of people felt like the songs all sounded the same. And that's kind of what I mean by this being a grower album, is that the more you listen to it and just give it your undivided attention, the more you understand how each song differs from one another. Sonically, I do agree that the entire Positions album fits really well together, and that at times some of the songs do sound like some of the other ones, but I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, especially if she had the intention starting out for the album to be cohesive like that. To me, it doesn't feel like it was an afterthought or that it was sloppy creation. It was that she purposefully set out for the songs to flow into one another. Your relationship experiences aren't all segmented, they all relate to one another. Now, I could be reading into that too much, but I love me a good read. Next up, we got Hot Press. They gave it an 8 out of 10, and they write, Positions proves Grande is still as much a pop diva as the woman she has long revered, but she's in the midst of a steamy extramarital affair with R&B that she seems unable to quit. And honestly, I hope it continues for her lifetime. Nailed it. I do agree with this. I hope she continues to lean into this R&B sound. Maybe not the next album. I would love for maybe a song or two to be touching on that. But ultimately, I just want Ariana to create and release the music that she wants. And if the critics don't necessarily like that, she has to make music that makes her happy. And honestly, if you're a big fan of hers, you end up liking the music because you know that she likes the music and she wanted you to hear it this way. It doesn't mean that you need to be a blind Ariana fan and love everything she does. But I think pulling the trigger so fast and not liking Positions and not giving it a full chance and letting the songs grow and letting the songs take shape in ways that only time can do is a real injustice. It's important to let the songs breathe. If you're not feeling it initially, my advice is for you to put it away for a quick second and then come back to it and give it another listen. Now we have The Independent. They gave it a 3 out of 5. And they write, it's why Grande has always felt particularly sympathetic, a true work in progress, open about her melancholies and misfires. She's likable and compelling as an artist, even when she's at her most creatively static, settling on what is comfortable rather than anything slightly dangerous. Like all of us this year, she probably just needs to get out of the house more. I'm not sure what to make of that. I mean, she could have made this album whether there was a pandemic happening or not. In fact, she started creating this record before quarantine. And I don't really feel like she's opening up about her melancholies as they write. She hints at them here and there, but the record does not focus on them. What's interesting of them saying that this album is not slightly dangerous is that in some sense it is. She took a risk by releasing an R&B style album, and she could have easily done another set of bangers like on Thank You Next, but she chose to release music that she wanted to create. And as an artist, that is the most important thing. It's not sustainable for an artist to chase hits and to continue making music that just performs well in the charts. Because ultimately, an artist thrives by creating a work of art that they love and that they back and that they want people to enjoy, or at least give it a chance. The Independent gave it a 3 out of 5. We're on the home stretch now, and the next one's from Vulture. They write, the album is a fantastical fairy tale journey into Ariana's depraved mind, all lush violins, sparkling with whistle tones, stacked harmonies, and novelistic descriptions of a quarantine that seems to have been spent primarily. It's Judy Garland by the way of RedTube, or what might have happened had Julie Andrews loved 69. For the most part, though, positions as a vehicle for Ariana to tell us about all of the she accomplished during the pandemic while also managing to write an album about said. Like I mentioned before, I think this album could be looked at as an album of songs full of but I just love the way Vulture wrote this, and it reminds me of the last line on Ariana Grande's next single, 34 plus 35, where she says, makes me want to 9 with ya. It's a visual that I didn't necessarily ever want to experience, but you can't deny that that song is truly about rolling in the sheets. I think it's gonna perform really well on the radio because it's just a pretty ridiculous concept and she's not pretending it isn't. It reminds me of Britney releasing If You Seek Amy. It was just kind of like a genius way to talk about and does it in a way that skirts the censorships and still manages to get the soccer moms up in arms.
You seek Amy.
Hey guys, so as you can see, I look totally different. It's because I've been editing this video and realized that I left out a really important review that I wanted to make sure I included. A member on Exhale with the username Albert Aspera took the time to write a really thoughtful review, and I wanted to make sure I included it in this video. Now, they gave Positions a 4 out of 10, which is actually the lowest score out of all the reviews I've read, but they do make some pretty good points, and I wanted to read an excerpt and see what you guys think. They write, the lack of theme also makes the record indistinctive. Take the appeal of Dangerous Woman, the recovery and healing of Sweetener, and the romantic frustrations of Thank You Next. Positions somewhat started with another sexy attempt she has been doing over the years, but it has no identity or story to begin with to captivate its listeners. I see where they're coming from, but I don't actually agree. I think there is a storyline here. It just takes a little bit longer to peel back the layers to find out what it is. Positions makes you do a little more work to understand where Ariana's coming from, but that makes a lot of sense because the older she gets, the more complex her thoughts are, and the more up and down her story arc becomes. Also, I feel like this album is definitely way better than a 4 out of 10. That's a failing grade, and to me, Positions is by no means a failure of an album. Quite the opposite. That's no shade to Albert Aspera. Honestly, thank you so much for taking the time to write that review and share it on Breathe Heavy. If you're interested in reading that review, I'm gonna link it in the description below. All right, now back to the original video. And finally, we have the Irish Times, who gave this a 4 out of 5. They write, the year is 2020, touching is banned. Any skin-on-skin contact must be reported to the Bureau. Kissing can kill you. While all of this is going on, Ariana Grande, the singer who never seems to rest, is having a lot of. Even though bangers are scarce on the ground, Positions solidifies Grande as one of pop's leading voices. I also really liked this excerpt as well because it is an interesting context to think of quarantine and pandemic and how dating is really freaking difficult right now. Trust ya boy. And she made an album where a lot of the songs have to deal with that intimate side of relationships. Now, I'd like to give you a little bit of my review. I will say some of my favorite songs are Motive with Doja Cat, even though Doja Cat's vocals sound a little bit fried and I can't really seem to get past that. But the chorus is so catchy and I find myself humming that all the time. I also really like 6:30, and by the way, she named that song 6:30 because when it's 6:30 and both hands on the clock are facing down, if you read the lyrics, it actually makes a lot of sense. I was thinking it was because the sun sets around 6:30. I don't know. A few songs that I also really like are My Hair. What's cool about My Hair is that Ariana's hair is kind of iconic. At first when I saw the song title, I thought it was gonna be about like some reference to her ponytail. It's actually about Ariana being so comfortable with her dude that she lets him run his fingers through her hair. Her natural hair is actually really curly. It's not this straight and ponytail kind of thing. When she's at home and she's relaxed, she has like this curly hair. So to let someone run their hands through her hair is actually really intimate for her. So with that context, it's interesting because the ponytail is like her uniform. And when she puts the ponytail on, she's like going to work, she's making music. And that's not the real Ariana Grande at the end of the day. Probably my favorite song off the record is Obvious. It's the one that I gravitated towards the quickest. It just was instantly catchy to me and I find myself playing it the most out of any other song. And the last song that I want to talk about is Point of View. This is another song that at first I didn't really love, but the more that I played it, I was like, this is actually an incredible song. It's one of those songs that you can play while you're in the shower and just scream at the top of your lungs, or when you're driving and the windows are down, you're just able to kind of let the breeze go and just sing the song as loud as you can. Her vocals are just so powerful and she sings so effortlessly, and that's really demonstrated on Point of View. You can love me when I'm pretty and all dolled up and being Ariana Grande, but you know, she's actually surprised that someone wants to love her and her ugly sides too. That really is true love. All right guys, thank you so much for watching. It's greatly appreciated. Hopefully this video offered you a different perspective on positions if you weren't particularly feeling it. And if you are, please drop me a line in the comments. I'd love to chat with you and just see what you think about everything. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Play that outro.